In the Middle Ages, survival wasn't luck, it was engineering. People invented tools so practical, they outlived kings, empires, and plagues. And here's the twist. 9 of those medieval creations are still with us today. From time itself to the glasses on your nose, their genius survives. These weren't dark ages, they were ages of invention. Let's start with a breakthrough that reprogrammed how humanity thought about every single day. The clock that turned the sun into gears. Before clocks, time meant sunrise and sunset. But in the 13th century, European monks and craftsmen created the first mechanical clocks. Heavy weights pulled gears, escapements clicked, and bells rang to mark the hours of prayer. The earliest models had no hands, just sound. Soon, town squares competed to build taller towers with louder bells. These machines didn't just measure time, they announced control over it. For the first time, humans weren't ruled only by nature's rhythm. They built their own. Clocks reshaped daily life. Merchants could open shops at the same time, workers followed shifts, and armies marched in sync. Civilization began ticking like a machine. And here's the kicker. The same principle, gears, escapements, regulated motion, still drives mechanical watches today. Every luxury Swiss timepiece has medieval DNA. When you glance at your wristwatch, you're not just checking the hour, you're looking into a 700-year-old invention. But time wasn't the only thing medieval people learned to master. They also found a way to fight blindness. Late 1200s, Italy. Venetian glassmakers discovered convex lenses that magnified text. The first spectacles were clumsy, 2 glass discs joined by rivets, perched on the nose. But for monks and scholars, it was a miracle. Suddenly, aging eyes could still copy manuscripts, read scripture, and preserve knowledge. Imagine a medieval scribe, his sight fading, then slipping on spectacles and seeing words clear again. It was as if wisdom itself got a second life. Eyeglasses spread from monasteries to merchants, craftsmen, and scientists. Today, billions of people still rely on glasses and contacts. Even advanced laser surgery is just a smarter way to bend light, a principle first harnessed in the Middle Ages. Survival back then meant seeing well enough to read, write, or weave. Survival today still does. But sight and time weren't enough, you also needed power. That's when people turned to the wind. By the 12th century, Europe faced a problem. Grinding grain by hand was backbreaking, and rivers didn't flow everywhere. The answer? Windmills. Inspired partly by older Persian designs, European engineers built towering wooden giants with rotating sails. These mills caught the wind and turned it into raw power. Villagers hauled sacks of grain, watched the gears creak, and walked away with life itself, flour for bread. Windmills weren't just machines, they were monuments to survival, visible for miles. Medieval windmills turned hunger into plenty. They ground wheat, pressed oil, even pumped water. Harnessing invisible wind meant independence from rivers or animals. And here's the twist, that same principle still drives modern wind turbines. Today, giant white blades spin on coastlines, powering entire cities. A medieval miller and a modern engineer would both nod. Capture the wind. Capture survival. From bread to electricity, the idea is unchanged. But while wind gave power, villages still faced thirst, and for that, they built something humbler. Water was life, but also death. Rivers doubled as sewers, ponds swarmed with parasites. Around the 14th century, villages adopted hand-powered pumps, wooden beams, iron pistons, and a handle anyone could use. Pull-up suction, push-down salvation. Blacksmiths forged the metal, carpenters built the wood. Suddenly, even children could draw clean underground water without trekking miles. A single pump could save an entire settlement. Forget knights, these were the real heroes. Pumps became lifelines. During droughts, they kept villages alive. During sieges, when invaders poisoned rivers, underground wells stayed pure. Families gathered around pumps as if around salvation itself. And here's the shocker, the same design is still used in disaster zones today. Relief groups ship hand pumps to hurricanes, floods, and refugee camps. Why? Because simple beats complicated. A medieval invention outlasted empires and still quenches thirst in the 21st century. But water wasn't always safe. Even underground people needed one more line of defense. Even wells could hide invisible killers. In the 13th century, potters discovered that fired clay could clean water. By carefully controlling heat, they created tiny pores large enough for water molecules, too small for parasites and bacteria. Communities experimented with sand, shells, and minerals to perfect their filters. Monasteries even used them to brew cleaner beer. For the first time, medieval people fought not just thirst but unseen disease. A clay pot became a shield against death. Families trusted clay filters because they could see dirt trapped inside. And here's the wild part: modern disaster relief groups still distribute ceramic filters built the same way. Simple, cheap, and nearly unbreakable. In an age when boiling water cost wood and money, clay made survival affordable. When you pour water into a filter pitcher today, you're echoing a medieval monk. But food safety was just as critical, and meat had its own enemy: time. Fresh meat spoiled fast. One mistake, and dinner turned into poison. Medieval villagers built smokehouses, wooden huts where oak, hickory, or fruitwood burned slow, surrounding meat with protective smoke. Too hot, and the meat cooked. Too cool, and it rotted. Timing was everything. Archaeologists even found preserved smoked meat centuries later. These huts were science labs long before thermometers villagers learned by smoke patterns and instinct. Smokehouses meant survival through winter. Hunters, farmers, even fishermen relied on them to turn fragile food into long-lasting supplies. Shared smokehouses became social hubs. Neighbors literally depended on one another. And the best part? The same principles fuel today's barbecue culture. Low heat, slow smoke, patience. Except back then, failure meant starvation, not embarrassment. Every brisket or smoked salmon today whispers a medieval survival story. But even smoked food needed storage into the fortress of grain. Grain wasn't just food, it was seed, money, and insurance against hunger. By the Middle Ages, farmers perfected granaries, raised floors to stop rats, vents to keep air flowing, stone walls to block damp. Spring rains, summer heat, autumn harvest all demanded constant vigilance. Grainkeepers acted like doctors, inspecting supplies for mold or pests. One leak could doom an entire village. Granaries looked simple, but they were engineering fortresses built against the tiniest enemies. Granaries turned harvest into security. Surpluses from good years carried families through famines. Traders could transport grain across Europe, knowing it would keep. Today's silos and elevators work almost the same way. Airflow, dryness, pest control. Medieval people weren't just farmers, they were food engineers. Every loaf of bread we eat has roots in their storage wisdom. But food wasn't the only battle winter brought a silent killer inside the home. Smoke. Early medieval homes had fire pits in the floor. They gave warmth but filled rooms with suffocating smoke. Families faced a cruel choice: freeze or choke. Then came chimneys. Stone passages that pulled smoke upward and out, leaving heat behind. It was revolutionary. Suddenly, homes could be warm and breathable. Skilled masons became heroes, mastering airflow before anyone had words for ventilation. Chimneys turned survival into comfort. The impact was instant. Children stopped coughing. Families lived longer. Houses stopped burning from stray sparks. Cooking became safer and faster. Even fuel was saved, because fires burned hotter and cleaner. Today, fireplaces and stoves still use the same principles. Every chimney is a medieval invention, towering quietly above our roofs. They didn't just heat homes, they saved lives. But even strong walls and warm fires couldn't stop blood and injury. For that, medieval doctors reached for terrifying tools. Battlefields and accidents demanded desperate solutions. Medieval surgeons wielded bone saws, cautery irons, and trepanning drills. They looked terrifying, but often were the only hope. Heated irons sealed bleeding vessels, saws cut shattered limbs, drills relieved pressure on swollen brains. Surgeons learned to judge heat by metal's colour and relied on wine as antiseptic. Archaeology even shows skulls that healed cleanly after surgery, proof patients survived. These tools saved countless lives, crude, painful, but effective. and their legacy lives on. Cautery became electrocautery. Bone saws became surgical instruments. Trepanning evolved into neurosurgery. Principles first tested by monks and barber surgeons still guide doctors today. The Middle Ages weren't just darkness and plague. They were centuries of survival genius. Timekeepers, glassmakers, millers, potters, butchers, masons, healers, all left us inventions still alive. Kings fell, castles crumbled, but these creations outlasted them all. And some may even outlast us.